It's 7:30 in the evening across India, live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Global. We'll bring you the day's big stories from across India and the world. I am Tanvi Taneja. Joining me from Washington, D.C. is my colleague, Caroline Malone. How are you, Caroline?
I'm good, thank you, Tanvi. Good morning to you from here in Washington, D.C., where it's 9 a.m. and also 3 in the afternoon across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we go live to colleagues in the United States to give us more on Michigan election results. But first, the headlines.
European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen says the threat of war for the EU may not be imminent, but it is not impossible. Proposes using frozen Russian profits for Ukraine's military.
It's time to start a conversation about using the windfall profits of frozen Russian assets to jointly purchase military equipment for Ukraine.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy seeks Balkan arms support at the two-day summit of southeastern European countries in Albania. As mediated efforts to reach an Israel-Hamas truce are underway, families of Israeli hostages begin a 4-day march from the Gaza border to Jerusalem, demanding action. And US President Joe Biden signs an order aimed at protecting American personal data by restricting its transfer to China, Russia, and other countries. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said that EU should consider using profits from frozen Russian assets to buy military supplies for Ukraine. Von der Leyen previewed a new European industrial defense strategy that her Commission will present in the coming weeks.
Let me be very clear. European sovereignty will make our partnerships stronger. It will never affect the importance and the need for our NATO alliance. In fact, a more sovereign Europe, in particular on defence, is vital to strengthening NATO. It is time to start a conversation about using the windfall profits of frozen Russian assets to jointly purchase military equipment for Ukraine. There could be no stronger symbol and no greater use for that money than to make Ukraine and all of Europe a safer place to live.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on Wednesday met southeastern leaders as they gathered for a security summit in Tirana, the capital of Albania. Zelenskyy is seeking international support for his peace plan as Ukrainian troops struggle to hold ground against Russian forces. Earlier, Zelenskyy signed a friendship and cooperation agreement with Albanian Prime Minister Rama.
The problems with supply of ammunition, which are affecting the situation on the battlefield. And we are interested in co-production with you and all our partners. Our governmental team will present the details, and we propose to hold a special Ukrainian Balkans Defense Industry Forum in Kyiv or in one of your capitals.
Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny's funeral and farewell ceremony will be held on Friday in Moscow. Navalny's spokesperson took to his social media account and said that Navalny's funeral will take place at the Boriskovye Cemetery after a farewell ceremony at a church. A heavy police presence is likely at the event. The Russian opposition politician died at an Arctic penal colony on February the 16th. On to the conflict in Gaza, which has inflamed tensions across the globe. As mediated efforts to reach a truce deal between Israel and Hamas are underway, families of Israeli hostages held for 145 days in Gaza began a 4-day march from the Gaza border to Jerusalem. My colleague Caroline Malone is in Washington, D.C. She gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Caroline, it's over to you now.
Well, thanks, Tanvi. As the Israel-Hamas conflict continues, families of Israeli hostages held in Gaza have begun a 4-day march from the border with Gaza to Jerusalem. The starting point for the march was a field outside Kibbutz Re'em near the Gaza border, where more than 350 partygoers were killed or kidnapped in the Hamas-led attack on October 7th. As mediated efforts to reach a deal between Israel and Hamas are underway, the families of the hostages called for the release of their relatives who are being held by Hamas. The Israeli army released a video on Wednesday showing its soldiers engaged in combat in the Gaza Strip, as well as conducting airstrikes targeting Hamas terrorist facilities. The footage appears to show airstrikes on Hamas infrastructure, anti-missile posts, and an operational command centre. British lawmakers are fearing for their safety as they face threats and abuse for expressing support for Israel. Since the October 7th Hamas attack, several politicians in the UK have reported increased intensity of verbal abuse directed towards them. Some are considering wearing protective measures such as stab vests during meetings or constructing safe rooms. US President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump both emerged victorious in the Michigan primaries held on Tuesday, further cementing the expectation of a rematch between the two leaders. But many in Michigan's Arab American community who backed Biden in 2020 are angry, as are some progressive Democrats over Biden's support for Israel in the conflict in Gaza. Donald Trump won the state's Republican presidential primary by a large margin, strengthening his grip on the party's White House nomination, as Nikki Haley, his last remaining rival, came in a distant second. Well, the Republican presidential candidate, Nikki Haley, took aim at Donald Trump a week before the Colorado presidential primary election, saying she'd be a better candidate against Biden. Well, Haley also reminded her supporters of a recent comment by Trump, encouraging Russia's President Vladimir Putin to invade the United States and allies. Well, DD India's Nick Harper joins us live from Washington, D.C. now. So, Nick, Haley is staying in the race despite the results on Tuesday's Michigan primary. What is her strategy at this point?
Yeah, Caroline, it's very interesting. I think here we have Nikki Haley, who state after state is losing contests and losing contests quite heavily to Donald Trump. More than 40% margin separating the two of them in this latest contest. It now means that she is down 5 state losses to Donald Trump's 5 state wins in this primary season. But she very much says that she wants to be the alternative to Donald Trump, the non-Trump option for voters out there. Super Tuesday is just around the corner, less than a week away, when 15 states will be casting their votes. And she says because millions of Americans are about to vote, she has a duty to remain in the race so that they have an option for someone other than Donald Trump on the ballot. She also warns that he will bring more chaos to the White House, to the whole of America and potentially the world if he's re-elected in November. So she wants to remain in to try and prove that she is not just a viable candidate, but an alternative candidate as well. And on that foreign policy issue of Russia, she is putting out that warning that the former president and his comments about Russia, his desire not to fund Ukraine anymore in its fight against Russia, all of that very much weighs against America's national security interests, but has huge implications for global security as well. So another loss for Nikki Haley, but she is determined to remain in this fight, at least for now.
And then, Nick, on the Democratic side, what more can you tell us about warning signs facing President Joe Biden?
Yeah, we knew that this was going to be a difficult primary contest for him. There's huge amounts of not just displeasure or annoyance, but real anger, real fury from Arab American voters out there in the United States, many of whom live in the state of Michigan. They are furious at the Biden administration's pro-Israel staunch position, but also the fact that they feel that the White House has not stood up for Palestinians, protected civilians living in Gaza. And that is why many of them said that they could not vote for him and instead ticked that uncommitted box. Now, in terms of the number, we had about 100,000 people who said that they were uncommitted voters. That's about 13% compared to Biden's 81%. It's not as big as a protest vote as we were expecting, but it does show weakness for the president. And I think it's also worth pointing out that there were a lot of voters who simply didn't turn out for the Democrats. They didn't even show their support. And we have to remember that Michigan is a key swing state. Donald Trump won it in 2016, winning it off the Democrats. Biden flipped it in 2020. It could potentially be the state that makes or breaks the presidency for one of those two men in November. So Biden needs all the support he can, especially from those Arab American voters who are traditionally Democratic voters.
Thank you, Nick. That was Nick Harper reporting in Washington. Well, US President Joe Biden's administration on Wednesday signed an executive order aimed at protecting American personal data by restricting its transfer to China, Russia, and other countries. According to senior US officials, the order will curb bulk transfers of American geolocation, biometric, health, and financial information by data brokers to specific countries of concern. The order is the latest bid by Washington to stem the flow of American data to China, which is locked in a years-long trade and technology conflict with the United States. Well, US President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, will testify behind closed doors at an impeachment inquiry into his father later on Wednesday, as Republicans allege Biden influenced US foreign policy to benefit his family financially. The hearing comes just before the US government will run out of money to keep all agencies open if Congress fails to act by the weekend. Investigators are expecting to ask Hunter Biden about his business activities, including his role with Chinese energy firm CEFC. According to the European Union Agency for Asylum, the number of asylum seekers in Europe has jumped by 18% in 2023, reaching 1.14 million people. This is the highest number since the migrant crisis of 2015 to 16, when many people from Asia and the Middle East fled to Europe. About 4.4 million Ukrainians have fled to the European Union because of Russia's conflict with Ukraine, and they do not need to apply formally for asylum. Well, France is on the verge of enshrining abortion rights into the country's constitution. Lawmakers in the lower house passed the historic bill last month, which now heads to the French Senate. But as DD India's Tony Waterman explains from Paris, getting over this last financial legislative hurdle could be a challenge.
When this constitutional amendment was debated in the National Assembly, it was in front of a friendly audience. And the bill, which guarantees a woman's freedom to terminate a pregnancy, passed with an overwhelming majority. But its fate in the Senate, which has a far-right majority, is far less certain, especially after the Senate president said last month that he was against it. Critics have argued that there are more important issues to focus on and that this bill is unnecessary because abortion, they say, is not under threat in France, where women have had access to the procedure since 1975. But the issue has taken on a new sense of urgency for many after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned abortion rights in 2022, reversing 50 years of precedence and leaving tens of millions of women without access to the procedure. Now, on Monday, a French senator tabled an amendment to the bill that could actually send it back to the lower house, delaying the process. But ultimately, it is expected to pass. The vast majority, some 80% of French citizens, support abortion rights. The goal is to have the amendment passed by March 8th, which is International Women's Day, and a 3/5 majority of lawmakers will be needed to approve the measure in a joint session of parliament, which the Macron government is planning to hold at the iconic Versailles Palace next week. Tony Waterman in Paris reporting for DD India.
Well, that's it from me here in Washington. Back to you in the studio, Tanvi.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for those updates. Caroline Malone joining us all from Washington, D.C. You're watching DD India Global. Still to come on the show. Britain's Prince Harry to appeal after he lost the challenge against the British government's decision to take away his police protection. And South Korea's military medics to be assigned to hospitals amid an ongoing doctor strike against the government's push to recruit more medical students.
We just don't bring you the news as it unfolds. We get to the heart of the matter.
We don't just present facts, we demystify complex social, political and economic events.
We break stories that shape the world's present and future because you deserve the truth.
I am Tanvi Taneja from New Delhi.
I'm Ollie Barrett from London.
I'm Nick Harper from Washington, D.C.
Join us on DD India Global Monday to Friday at these times.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Back to Asia. Amid protests and mass resignations by trainee doctors, South Korea on Wednesday asked military hospitals to fill the gaps in the health sector and provide treatment to civilian patients. 2/3 of the nation's residents and intern doctors had walked off the job to protest a government plan to increase the number of students admitted to medical school in a bid to address what authorities say is a shortage of doctors. The government has warned it could suspend the licenses of the doctors who do not comply with the back-to-work order. The young doctors who are protesting say the government should first address pay and working conditions before trying to increase the number of physicians. In a call to action at the World Trade Organization's 13th Ministerial Conference in Abu Dhabi, Brazil's foreign minister emphasized the critical need for the WTO to facilitate the transfer of essential technologies to developing countries, particularly for pandemic preparedness, climate mitigation, and energy transition.
Transfer of technology is very important for the development itself. And we, as a developing country, we are very concerned on reducing inequalities, poverty, and reducing hunger and so on. So, and of course, promoting a sustainable development too. For all that, we need technology. Those we do not have, so transfer of technology is very important. And we also express the same feeling from other developing countries, not only in our region, but in other continents too.
Moving on, as India and South Korea complete 51 years of diplomatic relations, South Korea's ambassador to India, Chang Jae-bok, said that the two nations have enhanced their strategic ties and that negotiations for Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, or CEPA, are underway and could be finalized before the year ends.
Free trade agreement negotiations are, in general, very, very difficult to reach the agreement, because in each country there are some industries. So with the conclusion of FTA, some part of industries will have a loss, and some part of industry or some part of the economy will have some gain. So it's kind of political negotiations domestically. So it's not easy. So still unfortunately, the issues are quite parallel, but at the last round of negotiation in January, end of January, we found some, willingness to conclude negotiations within this year. So hopefully, each side will present a concession to each side, and then hopefully to reach the agreement and compromise, actually.
India's Minister for Women and Child Development, Smriti Irani, on Wednesday hit out at some of the international agencies for putting old data with regard to malnutrition. Addressing the roundtable on developing an analytical approach for the assessment of gender budgeting in India, the minister said that these agencies know very well that they do not capture the entire data of the country.
Indices are used to embarrass India, knowing well that they do not capture the entire data. A poll that doesn't take into consideration that 800 million people have received for the past 2.5 years free food at their doorstep, 100 million beneficiaries, 25 million women, 75 million children below the age of 6 do receive supplementary nutrition. And when these numbers come, not one of these international agencies express anguish at the gap in understanding the Indian reality. For too long, these realities were dressed up and presented so that we could have been made to feel that either we are in need of rescue or we are in need of ideation.
Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates met with India's Minister of Health and Family Welfare, Dr. Mansukh Mandavia, in New Delhi on Wednesday. Gates praised India's remarkable efforts in health and family welfare, especially its leading role in combating tuberculosis.
Together with the health ministry, it's I'm excited to be here. I just came from Odisha, which was very impressive to see all the things they're doing, including, the digital innovation. It's kind of amazing what a leader India is in digital innovation. And of course, as part of the G20 meeting, that was one of the commitments that India made, was that it would help share all of the great progress being made to use digital approaches to improve healthcare. And that's an area, not just because of my original career, but in general, we see great potential for. And so, we're looking forward to the continued evolution of the ABDM vision on how we can track patients and coordinate all the different workers, and making sure we're focusing resources on the people who need it the most.
During the visit, Gates was introduced to the Bhishma Arogya Maitri Cube, hailed as the world's first emergency hospital capable of being set up within 10 minutes. This innovative solution can be swiftly deployed to disaster zones, either via airlift or even by bicycle, showcasing India's proactive approach to disaster preparedness. Spearheaded by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the initiative has been successfully executed through a collaborative effort between India's Defence Ministry and Health Ministry. India's top conglomerate Reliance Industries and Walt Disney on Wednesday announced the merger of their India TV and streaming media assets, creating a $8.5 billion entertainment juggernaut far ahead of rivals in the world's most populous nation. Reliance, led by Asia's richest man, Mukesh Ambani, will infuse $1.4 billion in the merged entity, with the company and its affiliates holding a more than 63% stake, while Disney will hold about 37% stake in the merger. And we now take a look at other stories making news around the world. Prince Harry's judicial battle against the British government's decision to remove his police protection while being in the country was unsuccessful on Wednesday. King Charles' younger son, Harry, filed the lawsuit against the government in London's High Court after the Home Office declared in 2020 that Harry would no longer be entitled to personal police protection while being in the country. Harry's lawyers said that they will appeal this High Court ruling. Germany is hosting 2 days of peace talks between Azerbaijan and Armenia in a new push to resolve a decades-long conflict between the neighboring Caucasus countries. Azerbaijan has been increasingly hostile to outside involvement in brokering an agreement, with the president accusing the United States of jeopardizing relations by siding with Armenia. 10 years after initiating the project, Apple has decided to discontinue work on its electric vehicle. The action puts an end to a scheme that would have assisted Apple in entering a new market and maybe repeating the success of the iPhone. As major automakers reduce their investments in electric vehicles due to the decline in demand, the project comes to an end. Tech company Humane has introduced an AI pin that integrates ChatGPT-style large language models into a user-friendly smart wearable device. Using a creative communication mechanism, the gadget, which is the appearance of a badge and functions without a screen, uses a conversational interface to react to voice instructions and hand gestures. The laser ink display, which projects visual information directly into the user's hand, is a crucial component of the AI pin's interface. The ever-evolving world of artificial technology, artificial intelligence. That's it in this edition of DD India Global. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter and Instagram at DD India Live. I am Tanvi Taneja from my entire team in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.
We just don't bring you the news as it unfolds. We get to the heart of the matter.
We don't just present facts, we demystify complex social, political and economic events.
We break stories that shape the world's present and future because you deserve the truth.
I am Tanvi Taneja from New Delhi.
I'm Ollie Barrett from London.
I'm Nick Harper from Washington, D.C.
Join us on DD India Global Monday to Friday at these times.